Hey everyone, Tony D and Little Joan here on a hot take by request from Art Vader. I've done a few requests, and I keep forgetting to mention them, but I needed to get this one done relatively early in the evening because we're talking about the Antifa Portland shooter, and I'm not going to say his name, although you may be able to read it there or look up this video. It's a little gruesome. You probably can't even really see it from where you're sitting, but that's him and the cops around him, or federal agents. I think they're a fugitive squad that hunted him down. Um, so here's what I've read. I've read a couple of articles, and what I'm seeing is that basically the cops, DHS guys, whatever you want to call them, federal agents, after they put out an arrest warrant, I think yesterday, because this guy had gone on Vice News and essentially admitted he was the shooter, but he said it was for self-defense. And Tim Pool did a piece on it, and he basically broke down that most of what he said didn't seem to have any basis in reality whatsoever. That he made up a bunch of stuff that, there were cars and everybody was out to kill him, and it all sounded, he sounded very paranoid. And there was an interview with his actual sister who said she's been expecting something like this for a long time. He got very extreme, and he just, it sounds to me, and this is just my opinion, that he had some issues. He had some issues, probably mentally, that they were unresolved. He got caught up in these politics. And keep in mind, he had a black power fist tattooed to his neck. That's pretty extreme. I mean, getting a neck tattoo at all screams to me, I'm an extreme person who's not too worried about pain, and I'm in this for life, baby. I mean, it's almost like a prison tat, really, when you get right down to it. I mean, how many people, and the ones, I mean, the next step is getting them on the face at that point. And I'm not talking about the guys who are like completely tattooed and they're obsessed with it, and they get like a flower pattern on their face, which is one thing. I'm talking about guys who get like FU tattooed across their forehead. I mean, in my view, there's something wrong with people like that. You got a neck tattoo. I mean, Post Malone, like, he's at least, I guess he's a rap guy. I don't even know. So he's kind of got an excuse. It's an image. He's cultivating an image. I get that. I don't get why a normal person just does it. He seemingly, not that this guy seems to be normal. I don't think he was, but your average schmo, if you will. So, anyhow, the feds kind of confront him, and he and all the details aren't in yet, but they got into a shootout. So no one's quite sure how that happened. He drove away. They went after him, and then he got into this shootout with him, where he was killed. And apparently, I read it, but this was only in one article. He had an assault rifle and shot like 40, 50 rounds. Somehow none of the feds were hit, which is good. Although it's a little sus, right? I mean, and you can't 100% look, I'm not against the police, but we have problems with the cops. So, you can't 100% totally believe them. They may be exaggerating it somewhat. But we'll see. I don't think so. I don't think so in this case, because this suspect was extreme. And I think he knew he was going to jail. He even said, he gave this Vice News interview, and Vice News, oh, yeah, we're ready to interview him. And he essentially confessed, but said it was self-defense. And the reason and he said a lot of other things in the interview that I've read clips of that just sound very extreme. It just sounds nuts. And it sounds to me like he had this sort of cartoon kid version of the way the world works. Like, well, it was self defense. I've just told you that on TV. Therefore, no one's going to come after me. You know, that kind of thing. And then once reality crept in and he realized, oh my God, they put out an arrest warrant. Well, I'm going to jail then. And he freaked out. And then when they came to arrest him, rather than just surrendering, he decided to go out in a blaze of glory, thinking, well, maybe I'll get away. I mean, I think that's what a lot of these guys do. They think, oh, I can get away. You know, I think a lot of times, and again, I've read a lot about the criminal underworld and how they kind of operate. And criminals are opportunists. And I think a lot of times when you get a criminal who has a bit of natural ability, maybe he's just quick, he's not stupid, he's physically powerful, maybe he's a good shot, you know, he ends up overestimating his abilities against the cops because he thinks, because the opponents he goes up against are almost uniformly usually pathetic, right? They're people he's intimidated, you know, and he lived in the world of Antifa. So in that world, who's his physical rivals? It's college kids that are heavy set, a lot of women, and just a lot of hysterical, emotional people who just don't have it even less together than he does. if you can imagine that, like they don't even have it together enough to be focused to get a gun and foment violent revolution, even though they talk about it all the time. They're still juggling those ideas in their brain, and deep down they really don't want to do any of that. They're just along for the ride because they think, well, this is cool. This is cool and hip what's happening, right? As I've always said, this is a trend. Oh, guess there's nothing else going on in this. This is Big Skid Media, by the way, their video of it. I'm sure it's all over the place. But, so this guy, to me, and again, I'm not a doctor, but I think he's mentally ill. I mean, I think you pretty much have to be mentally ill to at least a small degree to murder someone, with very few exceptions. Very few. I mean, I can imagine scenarios in which somebody is so, mentally tortured that they snap and go after someone, but I don't think this is that case. I think the mental torture, quote unquote, is a guy who was already kind of weak and vulnerable mentally, being exposed day in and day out to these extremist sort of ideas, and pushed and pushed and pushed, and until finally he became convinced of it all. And I've met some people who I wonder, they're a little too, down the rabbit hole in terms of what they believe with regard to Trump and what the media has fed them. And it's sad, really. It's very sad to talk to someone who, through no fault of their own, really, they just think, well, I watch the news and I read the newspaper and maybe I glance at something on the internet. I think I'm well informed. And they're just not. They don't understand I think the bigger picture. There's so much at stake here. For the people who want to win this game, everything's at stake. And they don't care about burning down a city. So why would they care about burning down a media company, a website, a TV personality, any of those stuff? Why would they care that CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and all these media outlets are just shot in terms of credibility and will eventually just fade into obscurity as brand names that nobody wants to buy? Because those people have bigger fish to fry. They could care less about that. Someone will replace them, and they hope to control those as well. And if they control those as well, they will eventually burn them down too, in an attempt to keep their power and money. it's a little bit like what's happening in comics right now. And I always relate everything to comic books, right? And I'm really getting off getting off the shooter here, but stick with me. So in the world of comics, comic books have always been a very small part of the media, but they had this great potential for so long, and then they were kind of finally realized in the Marvel movies to a degree, and but at the same time they're being burned to the ground by these same sort of ideologues like this shooter, and but they don't care, they don't see it, they miss the bigger picture that the corporation is just squeezing every last dollar out of this trend for now. And they'll always own the comics and the characters and the trademarks and everything connected to them. So if they have to ruin them all, if they have to like spray diarrhea over all those creations and ruin it for the next 20 years, they don't care as long as they made enough money to get through the next quarter. They'll take all that stuff, diarrhea encrusted, and put it on a shelf for 20 years or however long. And then at some point, they'll go back and go, well, do we have any old properties that we could bring back? And they'll pull them out and hose them down and go, yeah, here's a bunch of comics. I know this because I've seen it done in one of the big companies, one of the big movie studios. I had a friend who worked there, and that's exactly what their job was. Their job was to go through their catalog of movies from like the 30s and try to find trademarks that they could just take, rebrand, polish up, and reimagine, and voila, they own it. They'll make money on it, and it's a done deal. And so I think that's true in most businesses. So it's fine you're going to burn down these cities because there's always a company there. People just shift their money to a company that remodels, rebuilds, and gets contracts to fix an old city's infrastructure, Maybe now's not the time, but I'm talking like down the road. I mean, that's why all these guys in the stock market are constantly moving their money, right? Because sometimes things are hot and then something else is hot and they do different things. Right now, I think it would be a terrible move to buy into Starbucks, right? Because Antifa seems to hate Starbucks wherever they go. They're spray painting BLM or they're smashing the windows, even though Starbucks is as woke a company could be. But I digress. That was a big digression. Sorry. But getting back to this guy, it's sad. It's sad that a guy like this couldn't get the therapy he probably needed to have someone say, dude, what are you doing? Why do you have a neck tattoo? You're not black. Why do you have a black power neck tattoo? That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous tattoo. I'm in BLM. It's fine to be in it, but my God, don't make it your life. What is your job? What do you do? What is your goals? My goal is to tear down the state. That's an unrealistic goal. You're never going to do that. And, you're just making people uncomfortable and sad and anxious. Stop doing it. But no one, unfortunately, could reach this guy, apparently. So he ends up like this. And his own sister, there's an interview with her in the Daily Mail, if you're interested in this. And it's just, it's sad. She is saddened by this. And she seems like somebody's pretty on the ball. And she wants peace. She's just a normal person who just wants peace. And her brother was, thinks he can change the world. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of arrogant people who think that just by going to a wacky street rally where they throw stuff at the cops, well, that's going to change the world. It's not. It's not. If you want to change the world, you do it slowly. You do it in ways you control. You change yourself, lose some weight, You notice a lot of these guys don't lose weight. They're heavy set and they're running around. Oh, I'm in Antifa. I need another cupcake. You know, they look terrible. They're not taking care of themselves. They're running themselves ragged, and you know, that's the one thing they have control over, and yet they don't take care of their own bodies, their own mental health. So it shows you, I think, that people are avoiding things, and they'll do anything to avoid, you know, their demons. And rather than look inward, they look outward for things. And I think perhaps this shooter was one of those guys. You know, he would do anything to look outward rather than in.